I'm totally unprepared. I had no idea I was receiving this award. There were lots of great nominees in this category. I want to start because I know when somebody who's gone by initials their entire life, there is undoubtedly somebody in the crowd who wants to know what they stand for. So I thought I'd clear that up right now. J.B. Johnston's real name is Jerome Vincent. Victor, Jerome Victor. One of his classmates told me afterwards, so I figured he was playing me for a fool. When you get an award, you have to thank some people. I want to thank my mom and dad first. I wouldn't be here without them. I mean, I literally would not be here without them. I want to thank my daughter Courtney for that terrific introduction, and my son Nathan. I love you both very much. Thank you very much. And I wasn't going to mention this, but Nathan said we should come to church here more often. They have lots of priests, hardly any people. Communion goes very quickly. I want to thank my sister Shelley because she's the one person in the world who constantly reminds me that I don't know everything. It's because she does. And I want to thank Rick Mattias because nobody ever thanks the MC, and that's terrible, Rick. Thank you. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually had a 1 credit hour of work study in Rick's law office when I was a student at Kansas Newman College. I tell you that not because I was particularly good at the job. I just wanted to make sure you knew how much older he was. I want to thank Kim Silvernell Wagner, who I invited, who came here tonight. She was my RA when I first came to the dorm, and I invited her and she came, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. She interested me in campus ministry and student government, and the rest was kind of a mess after that. I pretty much took it from there, but thank you, Kim. And thank you. Sitting next to her is Jennifer Myers Stone. I wouldn't be here either without her. She typed all of my term papers. I cannot type. She never charged me. I had no money, and I wouldn't have graduated without it, so thank you. And she came too, and that's terrific. I want to thank Sister Joanne Mark because she was the academic dean when I was the student commissioner of academics. There's a total nerd there. She had me in her office 15 minutes every week. She taught me how to relate to faculty, and that helped me a great deal. I want to thank Sister Margaret Conover. Where are you at, Sister Margaret? She was the alumni director when I was a student, you remember? She worked me to death. She made me a better alum as a student than most people end up being an alum, but that's where I learned how to do it. Thank you. And thank you, Sister Charlotte Rohrbach, who was the alumni director when I was alumni president, because she helped me do that job well. And the last sister I want to thank is Sister Rose Therese Barr. I was in a St. Louis airport. I didn't feel well. I was about to pass out, and since Sister Rose Therese, you'll remember, she reached into her purse and pulled out a banana. She says, always take one of these in case I need one. Here you have it. Best banana I ever had. Lastly, on the list of people who came tonight, I need to thank the Honorable Judge Chris Magana for being here. He doesn't like it when I say it, but a good lawyer knows the law and a great lawyer knows the judge. He's a great friend, and he came, and I appreciate it. And I also want to thank my friend Todd Shoemaker and Tom Davis for being here. They're great friends, not good friends, great friends. And Judge Magana will tell you the difference. A good friend will help you move, and a great friend will help you move a body. And lastly, I need to thank the lawyers of Triplett, Wolf, and Garrettson. There's a whole table of them back there tonight. They never once question me when I leave at 4 o'clock to go do something at Newman. To support me in everything I want to do for Newman University, and they've never asked any question. Except, why aren't I general counsel to the university? And so, Noreen, I told all 8 of them they can take that up with you after tonight's dinner and you can discuss it. You might have noticed I have a daughter who's interested in public speaking. What I just did is called working the room. I have a client over here named Bob Simpson. Great guy. That was just a plug. I'm now going to get to my short speech, which is, I always prefer it. I come to a lot of these dinners, and I always prefer it when somebody talks about something they learned at Newman University and or tells a story of something that happens to them. I'm going to do a little bit of both. There are 3 things that I know I learned at Newman University. The first was the importance of a first impression. The second was the importance of God's providence in your life, that He will provide for you even when you can't for yourself. And the third thing was the importance of living a purpose-driven life. Now I'm going to tell you how I learned those things at what was then Kansas Newman College. This is my story. I can't tell you about the story when I was an RA in the marijuana bust in Father Ned's dorm room. The bishop said no. But I do want to say he was completely uninvolved. I'm sure of it, or when Della Qualls and I keyed into his room, he probably would have been dressed. So take that vision of your parish priest with you for a while. No, my story starts in the summer of 1983. July was a very hot day, and my parents brought me to Kansas Newman College for the very first time. It was hot, and we arrived 30 minutes early from Mulvane, Kansas. And the reason why is we lived in Mulvane, Kansas, and whenever you go to Wichita, the big city, you always arrive 30 minutes early because you might get lost. We arrived 30 minutes early to Ryan Library Lecture Hall, and there was absolutely no one there. No one. There was no one there. And so my mom, who's the academic in our family, suggested we go and take a self-guided tour of the library. Because after all, the library is some indication of how good a university is. And so Dad and I reluctantly agreed, and we took a tour of the library. We were all by ourselves in the periodical section when this little 4'8" nun came spinning around the corner, named Sister Dolores Strunk, who we would come to call Sister Dottie later, and she very politely said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, sister, I'm a new freshman, and I'm going to be attending Kansas Newman College, and my mom here suggested we take a little tour of the library." And she looked at me and she said, "You don't belong here, you're in the wrong place." She said, "You need to get out of here." And she took my mom and dad and I, and she guided us back to the Ryan Library Lecture Hall. She sat us in the front row of a completely empty building and said, "Wait here, it'll start in 25 minutes. The importance of a first impression. Neither one of us had said a word until my dad leaned over and he says, "JT, I think you're really going to like it here." Even the chaplain, John Sherlock, had to get her permission if he wanted to go in the sacristy. And she never knelt down in the back behind the unwashed masses. So when she knelt down behind us, we lengthened our prayer. And then Dan and I sat back together because we always figured there's strength in numbers. And Dottie said, "You guys are tall. After Mass, you're going to help me put up the Christmas decorations." And we looked at her and we said, "Well, okay, sister." And after Mass, she took us back into the sacristy. And there was this trap door over the sacristy with a rope she couldn't reach, and she said, you guys pull that down. So we pulled that down, and like it was an escalator, she walked right up to the floor above the sacristy, and we followed her, and up there was this great, big, beautiful, empty room with an oak floor. You could look out over the top of the chapel. You can see down those little domes. It's over the sacristy. I don't know very many people who have been there. And she said, go in the corner, and there's 2 boxes over there with the Christmas decorations. And so Dan and I went over and picked them up. And I opened my box, and it had these little 2- and 3-inch nativity scene statues in them. And Dan opened his, and it had a little plastic crib in it. And it was sitting next to these beautiful 18-inch and 24-inch tall hand-carved nativity scene, and this crib that had been built, was doweled together and had moss on the top of it. And she said, we're going to put up those little Christmas decorations. And so Dan said, well, sister, why? Why wouldn't we put up these big, beautiful Christmas decorations? And she said, the students will just steal them. And she said, besides, they go home for Christmas. Nobody goes to church here at Christmas. And we said, well, sister, maybe they would. We could get more people to come in Mass. We're in campus ministry. Let us put up the big statues. And no, you need Christmas trees for that. Do you have any Christmas trees? I said, no, we don't have any Christmas trees. Oh, come on, sister, let us put up the big statues. And she said, okay, you come back here at 7. You come back here at 7. You meet me here at 7, and Dan, you bring your van. Now, what you need to know about my roommate, Dan, was he had the largest, most enormous van you have ever seen in your entire life. It had the big 4-foot turtle top on it. It was huge. It was a cargo van. He bought it from his dad's company when they went out of business. So at 7 o'clock, we drove behind the chapel. She came out the back door, hopped into the passenger seat of the van, and said, drive to Star Lumber. We drove to Star Lumber. She said, pull up in front of the Christmas tree lot. We parked in front of the Knights of Columbus Christmas tree lot in the Star Lumber parking lot. She proceeded to pick out the most beautiful 12-foot, 10-foot, and 8-foot Christmas trees you have ever seen in your life. We helped the Knights of Columbus load them all onto the van. We had to put nets around them because they were so large. And then she looked at the Grand Knight of the Christ the King Knights of Columbus and said, how much? And he said, $180, sister. And she turned around to me and she said, how much money do you have? And I had $2 and Dan had 1, and we gave them to her. And she took those $3 and she put them with the $2 she pulled out from under her habit. She handed the $5 to the Grand Knight of the Christ the King Knights of Columbus, and she said, this is all the money we have. That'll be enough. That was how Dottie asked the question, that'll be enough? And he looked, and he swallowed hard, and he said, okay, sister. And she said, God bless you, Merry Christmas, turned around and said, get in the van. The providence of God to provide when you can't provide for yourself. We went back, put up the most terrific nativity scene you've ever seen. She made us hand carry the statues down one at a time because she was afraid we would break one. And on the last trip down with the last camel, and this leads me towards the end of my story, and Sister Thomasin's going to know this part, I noticed this conduit running all the way from the top of the building down through the sacristy with a cable in it, and I said, Sister, what is that? And she said, well, that's the rope to ring the bell. And I said, the bell on the chapel? And she said, yes. And I said, well, in campus ministry, we were told that doesn't work. We were told that hasn't been rung in 15 years. We were told the donger had been removed from it and that it couldn't be rung because it would damage the building. The building was so old that if you rang the bell, it would damage the building. And she said, yeah, that's not true. And I said, then why don't we ring it before Mass? Why don't we ring the bell? And she said, the neighbors don't like it. We can't ring the bell. And this is the only time I ever saw Sister Dottie smile. I looked at her and I said, well, if it was me, I'd ring that bell at midnight on Halloween and the neighbors would know I'm going to ring the bell anytime I want. And she got this sneaky little smile on her face. Okay, now it's midnight on October 31st, 1986. And the bell at Kansas Newman College rang not once or twice, but 4 times. It was loud, and it was midnight, and the dust came from the chapel and came down like this as the bell rang. I wouldn't know how I would know that. The students came out of the dorm. Some watched as the bell would just sort of swivel to a stop. The dean of students was very upset. Security called them. They had a police helicopter come and search the forest behind looking for the culprits that would do that. They never did catch them. But on Sunday, when Dan and I were in Mass saying our penance, Sister Dottie knelt down behind us. We lengthened our penance, and then we looked at each other and sat back together because there's strength in numbers. And she said, "Last night when you rang the bell, you broke one of my plants." She said, "I put some potting soil back there, you guys will repot it after Mass." And we said, "Okay, sister." 10 years later, I was helping the sisters build an assisted living facility in Mulvane, Kansas, and we were having a meeting at the then Province Center. Sister Dolores was there. She was probably nearly 90, I'm guessing, and she wasn't always remembering everything anymore. So Sister Jean Stewart, when we went there, said, "Why don't you go over and talk to her and see if she remembers who you are?" So I walked over and I said, "Sister Dottie, do you remember me?" She said, "Yes, I remember you." I said, "I have a question." She said, "Ask your question." "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who rang the bell at midnight on Friday, October 31st, 1986? And she looked at me and she said, "Because a bell is meant to be rung." And what I bet Thomasine doesn't even know is that when we got there at 11 o'clock, you gotta remember, Sister Dottie was the only one with a key. And she never left the sacristy unlocked. But at 11 o'clock on Friday, October 31st, 1986, the door was open. She said the hard part, and this is what she said to me, she said the hard part isn't knowing what a bell is for. The hard part is knowing what you're supposed to do with your life. And when you figure out that purpose, it'll be a lot easier. The importance of a purpose-driven life. I learned it all from Sister Dottie. So, I don't know you all, but tonight if you want to, you can come up and introduce yourself to me. If I don't get that chance to do that tonight, well, you probably find me at Long John Silver's on Fridays during Lent, because that's where I am. Or if you find me in the afterlife, hopefully I'll end up in the same place as Sister Dottie. I will be easy to identify, because I'll be ringing the bell. Good night, God bless you, Merry Christmas, and good night.